The Galactic Empire had stood for 10,000 years, an unyielding monolith spanning the stars. It ruled through fear, its dominion stretching across 1,000 species, each bound in servitude to the will of the Imperial Senate. To the Empire, humanity was merely another acquisition, a minor race that had stumbled into the galactic stage far too late to make any meaningful claim to power. At first, humans had submitted. Their diplomats arrived not with weapons, but with words. Their leaders swore fealty, their scientists offered technology, and their merchants sought trade. They had seen what happened to those who resisted the Empire's rule, the shattered husks of worlds that had dared defiance, their populations erased from history. Humanity was pragmatic. Survival was paramount. Ambassador Helena Carter had been among those who believed coexistence was possible. She stood before the Senate on countless occasions, advocating for her people, insisting that humanity could be an asset rather than an obstacle. Her words were measured, her presence composed, but beneath it all was steel, an unshakable resolve that the Empire mistook for submission. When humans were granted a handful of colonial worlds, taxed and monitored, many saw it as a victory. Others, like General Marcus Steele, called it cowardice. The rift between those who sought peace and those who whispered of war deepened when the Empire made its expectations clear. The demands grew heavier. Human colonies were stripped of resources to fuel the Empire's ever-hungry war machine. Human soldiers were conscripted into alien legions, thrown into battles not their own. Protests were crushed with cold efficiency. There was no room for negotiation, only obedience. Then came the massacre on Vega 3. The colony had been prosperous, its people hardworking. When a shipment of Imperial war materials went missing, the Empire did not investigate. It did not ask questions. It sent executioners. The Emperor's decree was swift. Let an example be made. Imperial legions descended upon Vega 3, their arrival marked by the blackened sky of burning cities. The people resisted, fighting with everything they had, but against the might of the Empire, resistance was futile. When the smoke cleared, the survivors were gathered in the Capitol Square. Among them stood Helena Carter, her diplomatic immunity ignored, her face bloodied but defiant. The Empire's representative, a reptilian Visari lord draped in the red sigil of the Senate, declared that treason would not go unpunished. The women of the rebellion, from young revolutionaries to mothers who had hidden their children, were condemned to die. Helena was the first. She was bound and dragged before the crowds as cameras broadcast the scene to every human colony, to Earth itself. She did not beg. She did not plead. She met the alien's gaze with an expression that was neither fear nor regret, but something colder, something unbroken. The rope was tightened. The executioner stepped back. The galaxy watched as Helena Carter hung. On Earth, silence gripped the world. Every screen, every device, every feed carried the image of her final moments. It was not just the execution of a diplomat. It was not just the murder of civilians. It was a message. The Empire believed it had one, that humanity would, at last, understand its place. They were wrong. Rage erupted like wildfire. In the streets of human cities, there were no speeches of restraint, no diplomatic efforts to quell the fury. The United Earth Council convened in a session that lasted less than an hour. There was no vote, no debate. There was only war. General Marcus Steele had spent his life preparing for a fight he was once forbidden to start. The years of appeasement, of bending the knee to alien masters, had made him bitter. Now his time had come. He stood before the council, his voice sharp as a blade. "We tried peace," he said. "They gave us war. Now we give them extinction." Humanity's fleets launched within days, not with the pomp of noble warriors, but with the cold precision of executioners. The first strike came against an Imperial supply convoy, a small force, heavily armed but unprepared. There were no survivors. The Empire assumed it was an act of desperation. Then came the destruction of an Imperial outpost, then a military base, then an entire planetary garrison. Each attack was methodical, calculated, and left no prisoners. The Empire had believed humanity weak. They saw them as a race unwilling to make the sacrifices necessary to survive in the brutal hierarchy of the galaxy. They had mistaken patience for cowardice. They had mistaken diplomacy for submission. Now, they saw their error in the burning wreckage of their ships, in the ruins of their fortresses, in the fear gripping the hearts of their people. As the war spread, a new message replaced the image of Helena Carter's execution. A single phrase, broadcast across Imperial networks, carved into the hulls of fallen battleships, whispered in the terrified corridors of the Senate. Asterisk, you started this. We will finish it. Asterisk. The first strikes were surgical. Humanity did not fight for conquest, nor did they seek occupation. They fought for vengeance. Every attack was a response to the Empire's crime. Every target chosen not for strategic value, but for the message it sent. The Imperial garrison at Eros. 9 fell in a single night, its command center breached by human operatives who slaughtered the officers in their beds. The naval station orbiting Carthos Prime was obliterated by kinetic bombardment, leaving nothing but drifting debris where once Imperial banners had flown. The Empire had committed a crime against humanity. Humanity answered with war. The Imperial High Command did not understand at first. They had seen insurrections before, species that lashed out before their inevitable submission. They expected humanity to burn hot and fast, to be crushed in weeks. But as the days turned to months, as the body count rose, something became clear. Humanity was not fighting for survival. They were fighting for extermination. General Marcus Steele stood on the bridge of the Retribution, his eyes fixed on the holographic map before him. Imperial fleets still outnumbered humanity's by a wide margin. Their ships were larger, their technology superior. But humans had learned quickly. They had studied the Empire's rigid doctrines, its reliance on predictable formations, its obsession with honor and rank. And they had found its weakness. The Empire fought with pride. Humanity fought with rage. The Black Armada was unlike any force the galaxy had seen. They did not engage in open battle unless forced. They struck at night, using stealth ships that the Empire's sensors were never designed to detect. They hijacked enemy transmissions, flooding Imperial worlds with images of fallen officers, of massacred outposts, of ships turned to wreckage. They deployed viruses into Imperial databases, erasing records, corrupting intelligence, turning the Empire's own logistics against them. Terror became a weapon, wielded without hesitation. The Empire had shown none when they hanged Helena Carter. Humanity returned the lesson tenfold. On the conquered world of Kelrath, the Imperial governor awoke to find his guards dead, their bodies arranged in eerie silence around his palace. Human operatives had infiltrated the compound without setting off a single alarm. By the time reinforcements arrived, the governor's severed head was broadcasting a message on every channel. For Vega 3, entire garrisons surrendered rather than face the fate that awaited them in battle. The Visari legions, once proud enforcers of the Empire's will, hesitated when deployed against human forces. They were used to battle against enemies who broke under pressure, who sued for peace when the fighting grew too fierce. Humans did not surrender. Humans did not flee. They fought with a brutality that unsettled even the most hardened warriors. The Empire's first real counterattack came at the Helios Rift, where an armada of warships lay in wait, expecting to trap the humans in a decisive engagement. It was a massacre, but not in the way the Empire had envisioned. The humans had baited them, feeding false intelligence that lured the fleet into a dead system where every asteroid concealed a hidden railgun. Every moon was a launch site for stealth bombers. When the trap was sprung, Imperial ships vanished in waves of fire, entire battlecruisers torn apart before they could return fire. By the time the survivors managed to flee, more than half their fleet was gone. The news spread like a virus through the Empire. The humans could not be beaten in a traditional war. They would not meet in honorable combat. They did not recognize ceasefires. Every time the Empire adapted, the humans changed their tactics, evolving at a pace their enemies could not match. Imperial commanders, once arrogant in their belief that humanity was weak, now spoke of them in hushed tones. Soldiers assigned to the front lines whispered of the shadows, of an enemy that struck without warning and left none alive. In the Imperial Senate, fear began to take root. The politicians who had dismissed the war as a trivial rebellion now understood the cost of their mistake. Some spoke of negotiation, of offering reparations, but their voices were few. The emperor himself refused to consider surrender. The pride of the empire would not allow it. Humanity, he declared, would be crushed. But it was not humanity that was breaking. It was the empire. On the bridge of the retribution, Marcus Steele studied the latest reports, his expression unreadable. The war was turning. The empire's supply lines were in ruins, its outer colonies abandoned. But he knew the enemy was not yet defeated. The heart of the empire still beat strong. He turned to his officers. "It's time," he said. "We take the war to them." The war had burned through the empire like a sickness, rotting it from within. Where once its fleets had patrolled the galaxy unchallenged, now they limped from battle to battle, scattered and disorganized. Whole sectors lay abandoned, their governors having fled or turned traitor. The fear that had once kept the empire's dominion intact had been turned against it. Humanity had done more than fight. They had dismantled the very foundations of imperial power. Marcus Steele stood aboard the Retribution, watching the holographic display of the Empire's final stronghold, Zereth Prime, the heart of their rule. A fortress world shielded by planetary defense grids, its orbit thick with warships. Even in its weakened state, the Empire would not fall easily. They had drawn their final line, and humanity would cross it. The fleet moved in silence, dark against the void. Thousands of ships, the culmination of every lesson learned, every battle fought. Not the massive dreadnoughts the Empire favored, but swift, precise weapons of war. They struck first at the outer defenses, breaching the network of sentry stations before the alarm could spread. Then came the bombardments, railgun slugs fired from the depths of space, tearing through orbital platforms before they could return fire. When the first Imperial ships moved to intercept, they found themselves facing an enemy they no longer understood, an enemy that did not fight for land or power, but for retribution. Marcus watched as the enemy fleet broke apart under the onslaught. Human forces did not fight in formation, did not engage in the stately, ritualized battles that Imperial admirals had spent centuries perfecting. They swarmed, they struck and vanished. They left wreckage in their wake and reappeared where least expected. Imperial commanders tried to hold the line, but the line had already broken. On the planet below, panic took hold. Civilians fled into the underground bunkers. Soldiers scrambled to mount a last defense, and the Imperial Senate gathered in desperation, speaking not of victory, but of survival. For the first time in its long and ruthless history, the Empire was afraid. Marcus led the ground assault himself. He did not wait in orbit like an emperor overseeing conquest. He walked among his soldiers, his presence a promise that this war would end here, on this world. Dropships roared through the sky, their hulls painted black, their insignias simple, a single blood-red line. The mark of vengeance. The capital city burned as human forces pushed through the streets, striking with the same ruthless efficiency that had won them every battle before. Imperial soldiers fought, but their spirit had long since withered. This was not a war for them. It was survival, and in the face of humanity's fury, survival was a distant dream. The once proud banners of the Empire lay trampled in the dust. The palace stood at the heart of the city, an ancient structure of obsidian and steel, its towers reaching toward a sky choked with smoke. Marcus stepped through its shattered gates, his boots echoing against the stone as he moved through the halls that had once dictated the fates of 1,000 species. The Emperor waited within, seated upon his gilded throne, adorned in the ceremonial armor of his ancestors. But there was no majesty left in him, only the hollow remnants of arrogance. Marcus did not offer him the dignity of words. He raised his weapon and fired once. The emperor slumped forward, his reign ending not with a speech, nor a grand final stand, but with the simple pull of a trigger. A fitting end. The war was over. The empire was no more. But victory did not bring peace. Humanity had won, but in doing so, they had become something else, something the galaxy had never seen before. Their enemies had called them weak once, had laughed at their notions of diplomacy and restraint. Now, those who remained whispered of them in terror. The fleet did not withdraw after the battle. It remained, its presence a reminder to all who watched. There would be no treaties, no negotiations. The Empire had hanged human women to send a message. Now, humanity had sent one back. The message was clear. They would never be ruled again.